Wherever you put your mind, you're putting your body. Our perceptions drive the whole ball game. And there are things you can attend to increase the healing process.
You have to tell your brain what you want, because your brain makes happen what it sees.
In every family, there's the one that eventually shows up, and they change the dynamic. It's not because I wanted to, I fought for it. I fought to be the one in my family. We changed who we are in a world in one generation.
Today, we are celebrating 800 episodes of the Model Health Show, and I've put together 8 of my favorite guest moments from the past few hundred shows, and I think that these moments are going to blow you away. You're going to get some insights on health and wellness, some insights on brain health, some insights on motivation and mindset. And I'm just very grateful for you being on this mission along with me. And I'd love if you could share in the comments below your favorite takeaway or your favorite guests from this very special compilation. And again, thank you so much for making me a part of your world. Let's dive into this very, very special compilation, episode 800 of the Model Health Show.
Brain reserve is the extra tissue and function you have, brain tissue, brain function, to deal with whatever stress comes your way. I was an Army psychiatrist for 7 years, and I realized, put 2 soldiers in a tank, expose them to the same blast, the same force, the same angles. One of them walks away unharmed. Another person is permanently disabled. Why? It depended on the brain reserve or the brain health they brought into the accident. And brain reserve is happening throughout our whole life. And even before we're born, it's the health of the mother, it's the health of the father. So parents who smoked as teenagers, their children have less reserve. Parents who are under great stress when their mothers, when they're pregnant with a child, that child is born with less reserve. Parents who are smoking pot, in Durango, Colorado, the incidence of babies born with marijuana is up 1,700%. It's horrifying that baby's going to have less reserve. And then it depends on what happens throughout your life. Those of us that played football, we're stealing our reserve. I had no clue, but stealing our reserve. Those of us that grew up on fast food, less reserve. Those of us that grew up in houses of high adverse childhood experiences, stealing our reserve. Those of us that grew up with parents who cared, parents who paid attention, parents who read with us every night, more reserve. And so every day, and it happens throughout your whole life, every day you're building reserve, money in the bank for brain health, or you're stealing reserve. And if you go to bed a half an hour early, you're building reserve. If you decide to stay up and, I'm just going to finish this series on Netflix, and you go to bed at 1 o'clock and you have to be up at 5, you just stole a whole bunch of reserve, because you know this, when you don't sleep properly, it turns off 700 health promoting genes, which means trash begins to build up in your brain and it steals reserve. One of my first books in 1986 is called The Sabotage Factor, all the ways we mess ourselves up from getting what we want. And as a young psychiatrist, I knew if you blamed other people for how your life was turning out, you weren't getting better, because you're a victim and victims are powerless. But if you just think of responsibility, how much do I want for my ability to respond? So we're sort of living in a blame, shame-filled society, which is so toxic. But if I'm having trouble, it's like, okay, what is it that I can do today that makes this better? So whatever hand I was dealt, what is it that I can do today to make it better. And one of the exercises in the book, one of my favorite exercises, is the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want. Relationships, work, money, physical, emotional, spiritual health. Write it down. It's got to fit on one piece of paper. And then ask yourself, this is the exercise. Write it down. Does it fit? Does my behavior fit the goals I have for my life? And blame isn't on that list at all. So this isn't about what I should want, what somebody else wants from me. What do I want? You have to tell your brain what you want, because your brain makes happen what it sees. And if you see disaster, you're going to feel awful. Yeah. If you see hope, you're going to feel hopeful.
What you're taught in schools and by your parents are facts. And facts are context dependent. They're not true all the time, but people don't realize that. So, an example, how much is 1 + 1?
Obviously, people would say 2.
2, right. And I just gave another podcast where I don't want to keep saying this because soon everyone will know the answer, which is good, but they need to understand what's behind the answer. What's behind the answer is that sometimes, okay, whatever we're taking as absolutely true is sometimes true, not all the time. So 1 + 1 = 1 if you're adding 1 pile of laundry plus 1 pile of laundry. If you add 1 cloud plus 1 cloud, 1 + 1 is 1, and so on. In the real world, it probably doesn't equal 2 as or more often as it does. And the reason it's a good example is because this is the one fact everybody knows, right, but it's wrong. All right. And, so if we didn't learn things in this absolute way, everything would be more interesting. Yeah. So, for example, we've done a lot of work on fatigue. And most people think the body is such that after a certain amount, you're just going to get tired. That's all there is to it. But fatigue turns out to be mostly a psychological construct. Fatigue is context dependent. So the first test we did of this was so simple. We asked people first to do 100 jumping jacks and tell me when you're tired. They get tired at around 70. Then we ask another group of people, do 200 jumping jacks. Tell me when you get tired. They get tired at 140, all right? And so on. So as soon as you change the context, our energy comes back, all right? And, so imagine, and a picture that comes to my mind frequently is somebody who's word processing all day. Back starts to hurt, and then they go home and they play the piano, all right? It's the same thing, but it's completely different.
Different keyboards.
Because of the, yeah. And so if we change the context often enough, fatigue will be a thing of the past. All right. So, our perceptions drive the whole ball game. And we have very rigid ideas because we all grew up, many years before you, in a world where we had mind and body, and they were separate things. And and the assumption was we have to keep the body healthy. Not realizing that how important it was to keep the mind healthy. And all of the work that we've done, many experiments described in The Mindful Body, which goes beyond this idea. But the idea is to put the mind and body back together. These are just words. When we put them back together, it's one thing. Anything that's happening on any level, your thoughts, your body, is happening basically all at the same time. So if you imagine that your mind and body are one thing, then wherever you put your mind, you're putting your body. There's a study I want to tell you about. It's about colds, a common cold. So we take people, I'm going to give you a rough outline of it. The details are in the book. And people are in the lab and they see a big video of people coughing and sneezing. The room is set up with things like tissues and chicken soup, everything to prime a cold. Okay. Without introducing an antigen, people get sick. Okay. How it happens? Well, one possibility is that when you have a cold, it never fully goes away. So it becomes dormant. And these primes awaken it. or something even more mysterious. But you can think yourself into it, and I assume we can think ourselves out of it. It's very hard to do a study showing that we can talk ourselves out of the cold, because when people have colds, the scientific community is not eager to have them all come together and spread the cold to other people. And also that you just want to stay in bed and watch TV and eat what you're not supposed to eat as you baby yourself to get over the cold.
There's even studies where they're exposing people to what they believe to be, whether it's like from somebody else's mucus that has a pathogen in it, and folks aren't getting sick when exposed to the thing.
Yeah.
What's going on behind the scenes? I would imagine there's context involved, and also probably it has to do with our level of health, our level of stress, and things like that.
From my perspective, the major killer is stress. Now, the medical model way back when, decades ago, thought that psychology and things like stress were irrelevant. All that mattered was whether you introduced bacteria, pathogen, whatever, to get sick. And now they've come closer to appreciating the importance of psychology, but I'm still trying to get people come the whole way. We don't have to wait so long until we realize that our psychology is probably the driving force for all of it.
I think there's an issue in the world today that's just, it's its own epidemic, which is that people think they're further away from their life they want than they are. They have this, they don't lack vision. The Bible says where there's no vision, the people perish. But I think if you actually dove into that, it's not that there's no vision. Would you rather be happy or sad, rich or poor, help people or not help people? You got a vision for your life. The problem is you think it's so far away. Because you think that's far away, you act in accordance with that belief system and you perpetually keep it there. And so, but the truth is that's a lie. I've proven it in my life, so have you. Your truth is you're one relationship, one meeting, one podcast, one book, one new thought, one new emotion away from a completely different life. It's much closer than you think it is. But because you don't understand that, or you don't understand how to find those relationships, those thoughts, those meanings, that you keep it that far away. One thing I want to tell everybody here is that, when you see a happy or successful family, either or, at some point back in their lineage, they weren't. And then the one shows up. And that one changes freaking everything for that family. And Neo's the one in that movie. I'm the one in my family. I changed the way my family thinks. I changed the way the world treats us. I changed the way we live. We're never going back again. I've changed it. The world does not have their thumb on my family ever again. We call the shots now, man. Right? And in every family, there's the one that eventually shows up, and they change the dynamic. They change the emotions. They change in your family, you're the one, right? And everyone listening to this, even the fact you go, nah, I'm not the one, that's probably makes you the one. But it's not because I wanted to. I fought for it. I fought to be the one in my family. We changed who we are in the world in one generation. My dad made the decision to get sober, and then I took it to the next level and we changed it. So I love that part of the matrix, the one. Because I believe in every family, the one eventually appears. One of the ways I've been able to change my state and change my emotions is how I move my body. The quickest fix for me on changing my emotions is to change my physiology, is to work out, is to walk, is to make love, is to laugh. These are things that quickly change my emotions because the same physiology is required in all of them. So I know you're an expert on this as well, but this is why your show matters so much to me, because it's very difficult if you're not moving your body and using it in an elegant and beautiful way to the best of your ability, that you can generate the emotions on a regular basis that you want. Stagnation and a lack of health makes it very difficult to feel bliss and peace when you're not moving your body. So when people ask me, so what's a change agent for you emotionally? Move my body. I'll take a walk, I'll take a run, I'll do a workout, I'll do jumping jacks in my office if I have to, but I'm going to change my physiology that oftentimes changes my emotions and my state.
There's a difference between real thinking and what is called mentation. Mentation is the daily regurgitation of the thoughts you had yesterday, day before, and some people mistake that for thinking. Real thinking is inspiration. I call it human interruptus, where you interrupt the mentation. If you read a good book on inspiration, you listen to this podcast, you listen to something that's going to interrupt your mentation, then a new idea can come in, an inspiring thought can come in. Now that's thinking, but most people don't think. They're just regurgitating. And then what happens is the vanity of the ego takes ownership in those thoughts that become opinions, points of view, positionalities. Those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions. And then the vanity of the ego wants to protect that. I'm right. that opinion's wrong, this opinion's right. I tell people, don't cherish your opinions. I mean, it's an old Zen statement. Above all, cherish no opinions, because they're going to change. The opinions you had when you were 16, you don't have those opinions today, but you probably fought for them when you were 16, you know? So the idea is to hold all of your opinions lightly, because as you get new information, new insights, new revelations, you will grow. So we move from mentation through mind fasting, interrupting that flow, and become open to inspiration. And then we change. That is, you know, that's what we want to do. We don't want to be the same person we are at this moment or who we were 5 years ago. We want to be always on the edge of discovery of the good and the beautiful and the lovely and the intelligence that's within us. So we're actually living to grow. But when you're unconscious, you live to protect who you think you are. That's the ego's job, to protect this limited identity. But when you're able to mind fast, you're able to meditate, you're able to sincerely study to grow, then, you know, psychologically, we would say having a healthy ego. Spiritually, we would say you're going to transcend the ego's clutches. But ultimately, you're living to discover more and more about yourself. And again, many people aren't living there. They're living to protect themselves and to protect their identity, rather than what within me is trying to emerge that I don't even know about yet. The unknown. You know, like who I am today. My 16-year-old would be flabbergasted as to what I get to say and do and who I get to associate with and where I get to travel. It'd be like, no, that's not, no, you know. So we have to always live on the edge of greater discovery.
The more money we spend on healthcare, the sicker we're getting. The more nutrition and fitness research that we publish, the sicker we're getting. The more we specialize in healthcare and literally invent new medical and surgical subspecialties, the sicker we're getting in America. You got to step back and scratch your head a little bit. If the more we're spending and the more we're investing, the sicker we're getting, maybe we're focusing on the wrong problem. Maybe we have the wrong approach. And, you know, you look at some of the rhetoric that's coming out of the system, like trust the science. And while I'm on PubMed every single day, and there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of scientific references in this book, you have to think about, like, what is the subtext of that statement, trust the science? The subtext is that you should not trust yourself. And this is really where the healthcare conversation has gone very, very dark, because let's look at the world. We are the only species with PubMed and experts, and we are the only species with a chronic disease and obesity epidemic. And so we're being told to trust the science and not actually trust our body awareness, our deep internal knowing, our hunger cues. And in doing so, we have become the sickest nation in the history of the world.
Ultra-processed food is a science experiment. Ultra-processed food is not the free market at work. It is a rigged system where tens of thousands of scientists, as the cigarette industry declined in the 1980s, went to food companies. And you literally have food companies today as one of the biggest employers of scientists in the world. They are doing science experiments to make this food addictive and to make it not filling. And that's what we're giving to our kids. That's the problem with ultra-processed food. You know, you have a lot of the evidence-based bros saying, well, no, it's the calories. Calories have gone up in the past 30 years. Well, why have calories gone up? Because it's gone up with ultra-processed food consumption, which is weaponized to make us eat more. The problem, we know how to regulate our calories. It's like, no, it's not, the problem's not ultra-processed food. The problem's, they're one and the same. We're being poisoned and we're being addicted, and we have a mass drug addiction crisis here. And we literally have the characteristics of addiction denial from parents who are addicted to these foods and giving them to their kids because they're normalized. The root of the problem is ultra-processed food. The foundation of public policy should be firing every nutrition researcher in the country, letting go of all the corrupt USDA advisors, everyone. One policy, get ultra-processed food consumption down, because as ultra-processed food consumption goes down, scientists and these companies aren't able to weaponize our food.
So when I had the opportunity to take over this study that had tracked hundreds, now thousands of lives for so many years, I thought this would be the coolest thing to devote my time to. This is so unusual that a single study of the same people has lasted 85 years. But the thing that surprised us was that the people who stayed healthy and lived the longest were the people who had the warmest relationships with other people. And when we found that, we didn't believe it at first. So we thought, how could this be? I mean, okay, having good relationships could make you happy. That makes sense. But how could it get into your body and predict that you'd be less likely to get coronary artery disease, or that you'd be less likely to get arthritis, or that you would live longer? How could that possibly happen? The best hypothesis with some good data is that it's about stress, that good relationships seem to be stress relievers. And I'll explain. So, when something happens to us, you have a really upsetting thing happen during your day, you get a ticket, or some medical crisis happens, you can literally feel your body change. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up. It's called fight or flight mode. And we want our bodies to respond that way. But then when the threat is removed, we want our bodies to come back to baseline. And one of the things you'll notice is that, if you have something upsetting happen in your day and, you're thinking about it and you're upset about it, if you have somebody at the end of the day you can talk to about that, and you're able to talk to them, you can literally feel your body calm down and go back to that equilibrium. What if you don't have anybody you can talk to like that? And so we think what happens is that people who are more isolated, lonely, less connected, that those people stay in a kind of low-level fight or flight mode of chronic stress, higher levels of stress hormones circulating in their bodies, higher levels of inflammation all the time, breaking down body systems slowly but gradually. And so that's what we think is one of the main drivers of how relationships can either improve our health or the lack of good relationships can break it down.
Imagine trying to explain to a 19-year-old Tom Brady who's really convinced that the coaches don't like him, that they're not giving him the opportunities they're giving the other players, and him sharing that with me. And I'm listening carefully, because that's what I do. I listened, and he vented, and he's emotional. And I shared with Tom, I hear you, I feel your pain. Who gives a rat's ass about what the coaches think? What do you think? You want the coaches to believe in you, and you don't believe in yourself, son. So until you believe in you, don't expect me to believe. Now, the good news is I'm crazy enough to believe anyway. And I believe that you're capable and qualified of transforming your mindset, transforming the way that you see this, and take full responsibility for, if you're only getting three reps, those got to be the greatest reps that anybody's ever seen. And then they'll give you 5. And then over time, look out, and that's how you transform. So yes, taking total responsibility. For example, if we use that same example, we look at Tom, and Tom wants to be a professional football player, and he's not even in the lineup. I said, you need to train as though you're going to be a professional football player. In fact, why don't we get football out of the equation? I said, why don't you train like an Olympic athlete? That's a different mindset than I want to play football and I want to be in the NFL. Why don't you be one of the best athletes on the team? Why don't you change the way that you're approaching this? And it seems to have worked out a little bit.
Right. The results speak for themselves.
The things that I thought were just overwhelming and horrendous that happened in my life prepared me to work with others. It prepared me to be able to hear somebody going through stuff and not judge them. somebody is tripping, dipping, and slipping, and not just say, you tripping, dipping, and slipping. This is what's going on. This is what you can get out of it. One of the most important lessons I try to teach is you can either go through life or grow through life. You can go through it or grow through it. And if you choose to grow from the obstacle, grow from the challenge, grow from the difficulty, if your mindset is to like, whatever's being delivered, I can go through it. I'm suggesting to people that they have an attitude where they give 100% of the time and have that as their default mode.
Yeah.
Well, every now and then somebody will be smart enough and say, 100%, 100%, nobody can do that. And I said, of course not. But if my mindset, if my primary form of operating in my head is to try to give 100%, I no longer am coming off at 30%, 40%, 50%. So let's look at this 100% of the time. There are things you don't like to do. I need you to give 100% to the things you hate. Now, if you create a habit of giving 100% at the stuff you hate, what you gonna do when you get to the stuff you love? You'll have a habit of trying to give 100%. If my mindset, my default mode is 100% of the time, my worst day is gonna be better than the average man's best day. That's a game changer, baby. That changes the game.
We've never set out to demonize sitting, and sitting's awesome and we do plenty of it. But what you do see is people are sitting in a chair and often doing that for 5, 6, 8, longer, even longer sometimes, without actually moving at all. And, Kelly's obsessed with the lymphatic system. And so one of the things that happens when we sit is that, the way that you clear your lymphatic system, you clear the waste out of your body is through movement. I'm like sitting on a 5 or 6 hour flight is like the perfect example of marathon sitting. And one of the downstream negative consequences is that you're not moving and you're not flushing your system. You're not getting, you're not getting the garbage out of your body. Then you're sitting all the time with all of your joints at 90-degree angles. Yeah. And, we're not meant to be at 90-degree angles with our joints all the time. And so I think a lot of people don't make the connection between low back pain and general stiffness and other issues they have with just bouts of marathon sitting.
There's a whole new field called sedentary biology, where we're starting to understand a little bit about what happens to our physiology, our normal processing of our bodies when we don't move. And maybe we can try to limit that because it really makes it more difficult for us to do the things we want to do. Hey, I want to change my body composition. Well, that's going to make that more difficult. I want to be more awesome at sprinting. Well, that's going to make that more difficult. I want to have healthier tissues. I want to have more clarity in my brain. It makes that more difficult. So again, that allows us to expand. And when we empower people with that idea, say, hey, wow, I really been sitting a long time. Let me see if I can limit that in whatever way I want.
There was a study done some years ago that people who could get up and down off the floor without putting their hands down lived longer and lived better. And lived better, which I think is what we're all really looking for. And so what we realized is that people don't sit on the ground enough. In our culture, we're always chair bound. We're, driving, commuting, sitting in chairs at our offices. Our whole environment is set up to be sitting in chairs all the time. And so we've literally lost the ability to both get up and down off the ground and sit comfortably on the floor. I mean, it's really interesting when we suggest to people like, oh, okay, well, you need to start this test by being crisscross applesauce. And a lot of people go, crisscross applesauce? What? I can't sit like that. And so it's just an ability that we've really lost that's so fundamental as humans. And, what we've recommended to people is that they just had more sitting on the floor while they're watching Netflix, which is something that we know everybody's doing at least 3 hours of a day. And so we just think it's so fundamental as a human to be able to get up and down off the ground. And also it makes us more durable. And I think the word we like, and we're fans of all things longevity, and obviously this book is connected to that. But I think the word we prefer is durability, because really Kelly and I don't care if we live to be 100. We want to live as long as we live, but feel good for as long as possible, and then just like fall off a cliff and die. That's our goal. Like we just kind of want to be like this and then fall off the cliff and die and feel as good as we can and live independently and be able to move with our body and hopefully keep our mental acuity. That's really our goal. And to us, that's more durability, because if that means we live to be 85 or 90, like great, we would rather feel good and then just fall off the cliff. So I think that sitting on the ground thing is so fundamental to this book and seems so straightforward, but really is strangely revolutionary since we never do it.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
And you see that your blood sugar goes up 80 points, which would be a really high rise. You can say immediately in one time of just checking this food with your continuous glucose monitor, this food is likely causing a big insulin surge in me. And we know that one of the many functions of insulin is that it blocks fat burning in the body.